Thank you to those who've been doing some introductions, and now that looks like we got a steady group here, I'll go ahead and really kick this off. So welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Drew Scammell, and I'm a program associate with the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or ICED, at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. On behalf of the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, I'd like to welcome you to today's NSF Noyce Proposal Writing Webinar for proposals centered on research experiences in STEM settings, or RESS for short. And today we're featuring NSF Program Directors, Drs. Mindy Capaldi and John Haddock. Before I hand it over to our wonderful NSF colleagues, there's a few quick housekeeping notes. This presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be made available in the coming weeks on the NSF Noyce website at nsfnoyce.org. You will also receive an email with a link to the recording when it's available in addition to the slides. Additionally, we have closed captioning for this session. You can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And with all that, I'm going to hand it over to Drs. Capaldi and Haddock. Thank you so much, y'all, for joining today.
Thank you, Drew, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to share my screen, which should show a set of slides. And my name is Mindy Capaldi, as you said. I am one of the program officers that works on the Noyce program, and I've been involved in the Noyce research experiences in STEM settings, which is what we're going to talk about today. I think this is the third of 4 webinars in a series we're doing now that a new Noyce solicitation has been released. And so this webinar is not going to talk about the main tracks of Noyce. We're going to talk about the Noyce research experiences in STEM settings. And without further ado, we have a fairly brief set of slides. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and answers, Q&A, and we have a few built-in opportunities for that, but really feel free to ask questions at any point. We'll start with just a general Noyce overview. We weren't sure how familiar everyone here would be with the Noyce program overall, but then we'll fairly quickly get into the specific area of research experiences in STEM settings, which is the focus of this webinar. And that comes from a Dear Colleague letter, DCL 21086. Following that, after a Q&A session, we'll give you a few tips and advice on preparing the proposal, actually how to get it submitted, because it's not really with the usual Noyce deadline. It doesn't have to be, at least. And so we'll talk through that some. And then we'll wrap up with just what else is coming with Noyce in terms of opportunities or webinars or other resources. So here's the Noyce team. You see 3 program officers that are circled. One of them is me, Mindy Capaldi. One of them is my colleague, John Haddock, who's going to be a co-presenter. And then Julio Soto, he's not able to be here today, but he's going to be closely involved with the RESS research experience in STEM settings part of Noyce. And then, of course, Kathleen Bergen is our Noyce lead, and she is in the Zoom today. May stay quiet, may not. We'll see how that goes. While there's 3 main contacts for the RESS part of Noyce, really any program officer can help you with it. You can reach out to anybody, maybe you know somebody in particular, or you have a program officer for another project. You don't have to start with the 3 that are circled. So the Noyce program overall. It's all about addressing the critical need for recruiting, preparing, and retaining K-12 STEM teachers and teacher leaders in high-need school districts. There's a lot built into even that first point there. You know, what is a high-need school district? What does it mean to be a teacher leader? I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining specific terms in Noyce, but if you have questions at any point, we can delve into it more. A lot of the definitions for like what's a high need district are in the solicitation. Once teachers are recruited, prepared, and retained, we also want to support talented STEM undergraduate majors and professionals to become teachers. That goes with the recruiting and preparing. So it's about STEM students, STEM majors who become STEM teachers in K-12. Sometimes for certain tracks, Noyce can support in-service STEM teachers to become teacher leaders. And we will talk a bit today about pre-service versus in-service when it comes to the research experiences. There's some differences there in terms of how those are defined. And then the last point there is supporting research on the effectiveness and retention of K through 12 STEM teachers in high need school districts, which is can be in many Noyce projects, but especially track 4 of Noyce. So there are 4 tracks. Track 1 is about scholarships and stipends. Track 2, teaching fellowships to bring STEM professionals into the teaching profession. Track 3 is those bringing in service teachers to become teacher leaders. Track 4 is Noyce research, but we're not talking about any of those because none of those tracks are explicitly tied to the RESS projects. You could have another Noyce project in one of the main tracks, but you don't have to get a Noyce research experience in STEM settings project. So they can complement each other, but they aren't conditional on each other. So what are research experiences in STEM setting projects? Again, it's based on a Dear Colleague letter from 2021, which is tied to both older solicitations and the more recent solicitation. One thing to emphasize right off the bat is, unlike the other Noyce tracks, there's no specific deadline for these proposals. They can be submitted at any time, but you do have to get program officer approval prior to submission. We like for them to be submitted concurrent with our August deadline of Noyce. That can facilitate the review process, but they don't have to be. So a few main points about what we're looking for in RESS projects. They should provide research experiences for pre-service and or in-service STEM teachers. These research experiences are their STEM research experiences, and they should be in formal or informal U.S. research settings. So they could be in a university lab, a national lab, whatever setting is appropriate for the STEM research. The inclusion of individuals from diverse backgrounds is strongly encouraged. One thing that can be, I think, exciting and maybe confusing about the research experiences is there's no specific timeline or budget that we're looking for. It's really what makes sense for the institution and what is feasible and appropriate. And so project timelines can vary. You could have a project that's 2 or 3 years, you could have a project that's 4 or 5 years, and you would adjust your budget appropriately. Proposals should describe the teacher population that would participate, pre-service and or in-service. They should also describe the recruitment and selection processes, the actual STEM research experiences that students or participants will undertake, as well as the mentoring activities. How are they being mentored by faculty or other maybe in-service teachers or whoever else might be serving as a mentor, but at least the mentoring activities on the part of the research mentor. There should be some kind of planned professional development for the pre-service or in-service teachers for both teaching and research. And there should be clear desired project outcomes and project evaluation that aligns with those outcomes. The project team, unlike the other Noyce tracks, there's no really specific requirements for the project team in terms of who needs to be PI, principal investigator, but you should make it clear what their qualifications are and that those qualifications are appropriate for the project. Similarly, co-PIs or senior personnel, they could be STEM faculty who might lead the research experiences. They could be someone else at an institution or organization that would be appropriate and helpful for the project. Maybe a co-PI or senior personnel would include an in-service teacher mentor or education faculty. So there's some flexibility here for who makes up the project team. It depends on the project. And John, I just realized I can't see what number slide I'm on. I know we were going to switch at some point, so just stop me if I go too far. Participants, I think it might be after this. So we wanted to emphasize for participants that they do not have to be part of a prior or active Noyce project. Again, the research experiences can be complemented by an active Noyce project, but they don't have to be. And so similarly, Noyce scholars or fellows could be participants in a RESS project, but they don't have to be Noyce scholars or fellows. We've split the description on this slide into pre-service STEM teachers and in-service STEM teachers. So pre-service would be those who possess or are pursuing a STEM degree. This does not mean STEM education degree unless it's a dual degree, where it's kind of a dual major. They do have to be getting a STEM degree, as well as teacher certification. Participants don't have to be students at the grantee institution. So there might be a host institution where the research experiences are actually happening, but the participants don't have to be students from that institution necessarily. You could recruit from other places. For the in-service STEM teachers, they should be currently employed as teachers of STEM subjects in high-need school districts. And the high-need school district part of that is what is defined in a Noyce solicitation. The in-service teachers don't have to possess a STEM degree, but they should be certified to teach in a STEM subject, mathematics, science, engineering, or computer science. So it does open it up to, say, elementary teachers, but they would have to be certified to teach in a lot of subjects. So I think now is when I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John. Is that right, John?
Good enough, yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'll throw out my welcome to everyone. We really appreciate your being here and also appreciate your interest in this component of the Noyce program. It's really different from any of the others. Now I'm going to repeat some of the things that Mindy has said, add some additional things, but the one thing we want to be sure and do is to answer any questions you might have. So we'll have a Q&A pause and in a few more slides, and then have another Q&A session at the end. So let's just take a look at some of the things. Again, there are guidelines, but at the same time, there's flexibility. The budget, we don't have anything that's particularly set. In general, they will run between 350 and 750,000. But what you need to do is really look at the work you want to accomplish and what you will need to do that. And the second part of this, the additional advice, is very important, we think. Support participants appropriately. Now, some of these students in particular, or they could be in-service teachers, are maybe going to be giving up their summer to participate in this program, and they should be paid accordingly. So, and reviewers will pick up on that very quickly if they don't feel there's enough, or if they feel there's too much, in fact. So it will certainly be up to you to decide what's going to be appropriate. But in addition to stipends that you might give them, and that you probably should give them, there are other things that you certainly can use in your budget. Research materials, depending on the type of research projects. Housing, I know of at least one project that they were remiss that they didn't include housing because they had students from other campuses coming in, and they would have had more participants and be able to get, have a better group, I think, or a stronger group if they had been allowed to provide housing, and the funding did not have that available. Another possibility is to be sure that they can travel if you wish to local or national conferences. And this can be certainly both for the participants and the investigators involved. Okay. I'm going to the next one. Okay, in every DUE project, certainly we're looking for assessment, project assessment, in particular to give formative and summative feedback. Of course, the formative feedback is very important to allow for changes as needed in a particular project. But in this whole process of looking at evaluation and assessment, you should be examining what your intended project outcomes are, make those clear, what feedback will be given, when and how. Sometimes a timeline, or often a timeline, is very useful to see how project assessment, project evaluation will actually unfold. You want to give reviewers a vision of what that would look like. And you can have either an independent evaluator, it could be in the home institution, it could be someone external, or you could have the advisory board do this. In particular, if you have an advisory board, you should make it clear who is actually going to take the lead in this, or the leaders. And it's also advisable to include biosketches, maybe in the supplementary documents, if they're not in your institution. And a good idea is to get the evaluator soon and help the evaluator develop an evaluation plan. One that, again, would give summative feedback, but also formative feedback on the way. And so evaluation assessment is a very important part of any project, in particular the RESS projects, and so is dissemination. What would be proactively shared with the STEM community to make this clear? And by proactive, not in general, what one often sees in a dissemination plan is, okay, we're going to have publications and peer-reviewed journals. We will have conference presentations and maybe a website. You know, that's sort of a build it and they will come approach. These are very important components, I think, of a dissemination plan. But being a mathematician, I'll put it this way, think outside the ellipsoid. You know, what are some proactive things that could actually get others engaged at other institutions, for example? And how generalizable or transferable will your model be that you end up with? Will your project be? Will it be adaptable? Will it be adoptable on that? You know, so that's a very important part to include in your discussion of dissemination. Okay, I should mention that there are no education requirements, no education research requirements in this particular component of Noyce. Okay, but there is authentic STEM discipline research requirements. And so here's some questions to consider when you're working on your proposal, and we hope you are. Now, how will your project really foster authentic STEM discipline research experiences for pre-service teachers who are STEM majors? And again, they can be in service, but the Dear Colleague letter really does focus on pre-service teachers. Good ideas would be, certainly you want to describe the research topics and activities. I think that reviewers often are going to be looking for at least some examples of the type of research that the pre-service and or in-service teachers would be doing. And also make sure that you have the appropriate investigators, the appropriate project team in place. You know, describe the qualifications of the STEM faculty who would be leading, and determine if they're going to need any additional training, for example, additional mentor training. So these are things that you should be thinking about. And another question to ask is, how will your project help participants develop professionally, especially in their teaching and in the teacher preparation? And you should make connections between the STEM research they're doing and teaching and their professional development. So how will you integrate teaching and research, their research, into your project? Whether it's in the classroom, giving them ideas on how they can introduce the idea of research. It doesn't have to be the particular projects they're working on, but just the idea of the excitement of research in general. And another thing to look at, and very importantly, is what is your project likely to add to contribute to the knowledge base of STEM teacher preparation and teacher professional development. These are very important ingredients in any Noyce proposal. Okay, let's see what is next. Q&A one. So let's go ahead and stop there and see what questions you might have. So I guess you could raise your hand at this particular point. I think we can, let me look at a different view here where I can see others. Okay, so I have a view of the screen. Any questions at all? Yes, Charlotte.
Sorry, I realized after I raised my hand that you meant.
It's okay. I could see it.
So my idea for, kind of give you an idea, is that okay? I'm at a community college and we are in a really rural area where we have lots of small high schools around us, but they have like a couple teachers and they have 5 or 6 students. They don't have budgets to do any sort of cool research with their students like DNA technology. And a few years ago, I did a couple of workshops to learn to do DNA barcoding, and we bought some really like mini PCR, they were pretty cheap equipment, which is portable. And so what I would really think would be fun for us to do to engage high school students who often don't get to do cool stuff is if their teachers, high school teachers, could come here for like a week, do like a little DNA barcoding workshop, and then incorporate that into their curriculum. And then like we could send them the equipment when it's there for them to do it with their students. And so I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're looking for. I just feel like some of our students aren't interested in STEM in the beginning because they don't get to do anything interesting in lab, but also our teachers that are at high schools around here are just so limited what they can do because of budget constraints. And so I'm just trying to find ways like if they could be more excited about research and science. Does that make sense?
Well, anything certainly makes sense if it's going to get them excited about it. Like they can get their students excited about. At the same time, for this particular one, they really, you're talking about really in-service teachers, right? They really would need to be engaged in a STEM research experience themselves.
Yes.
On that. So I'm not sure what the research would be that you're thinking about there.
Well, so I was thinking of things like where they could just do things that they could do like in their own area, doing just sampling for insects, see what kind of insects are in their area, if they're different between different areas, things like that. I don't know if that's the kind of research you're looking for, or you're looking for more research on teaching.
Oh, no, not research on teaching.
Okay.
I mean, that needs to be integrated on how this research, this authentic STEM research experience is going to be integrated into teaching. So it should be STEM research. And so if you're talking about going out and doing biological field research, for example, certainly that's legitimate. And then you would want to make sure you have a faculty mentor who is qualified to help lead that or help mentor students in that realm.
What's interesting to me is they could do things outside, but then they could also do some of the cool DNA stuff, DNA technology, which is what kids always seem to be so interested in. Like that's how I get my students interested.
Yeah. And what you would certainly want to do is, what research questions, for example, or research investigations would they want to be doing? And Mindy, I don't want to dominate the answer here.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I would say most of the research experiences I think we've seen so far in proposals or projects are a little more longer term, more along the like 5 to 6 week or more scale.
Okay.
But there's no specific requirements for how long or how that it has to be summer research versus something academic or whatever. There's very little that's specific with RESS. So there's opportunity to be flexible. I think along the lines of what John was saying, want to know more, which obviously you haven't had a chance to tell us a whole lot in this briefing, but about how what they're doing is going to be authentic STEM research that would lead to professional development in the STEM research capacity. That are they going to have a chance to present their work maybe, or like something like that. Making sure it's robust enough as a research experience that it'll really carry into their hopefully their teaching.
So I started with this project as a cure for my biology students and just trying to expand it out and have teachers start doing it with their students in high schools. And then if they come here, they can do something even more advanced. But and so it's something that they could do multiple different ways, I guess, using the same kind of basic ideas. And
So,
answering lots of different types of like ecology type questions.
so Charlotte, I appreciate what it is you want to do, but the intention of this program is for in-service teachers and pre-service teachers to actually be conducting research alongside the researchers in their research labs. They could be research in the field because you've got plant biologists and water biologists or it can be in a wet lab in your wet lab. But the purpose is not to provide professional development on something, a skill set such as you've described about the DNA. This is meant specifically for research experiences. In other words, that they are doing alongside the researchers. If you are interested, the areas that you're interested in, I commend you as a former classroom teacher and appreciate it. But this is not the program. You may want to look at DRK 12 and see if there's any opportunity there that's in the Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings. So you may want to look at ITEST, and I can never remember the acronym, but it's ITEST. I don't work in either of those programs, so I don't know if what you're thinking about is appropriate to that. But if you or your colleagues are conducting research using DNA sequencing, and you want to involve the teachers in that, and by the way, you could have some of their students come along, depending on how you present things, and they're going to have a substantive multiple week, because 1 week is hardly long enough to get to say hello, experience on DNA sequencing to assist you or your colleagues, doesn't have to be you, who are conducting some research in that space. I understand that community college faculty are often not conducting research, but there is research that could be conducted. So we would certainly support that, but not the notion of providing in-service teachers with skill sets to transfer into their classroom.
Thanks for that question, Charlotte. We've had a few questions come in the chat. One of them I answered in the chat, but I wanted to make sure I say it aloud for everybody. And it's about whether a project can include both in-service and pre-service teachers. And yes, that would be fine. You could have both. And then the next question is about really, I think, around budget and what would be appropriate. You know, if there was a project with 30 teachers across 3 years, is 600,000 too much, or what would be? And that's, I definitely welcome John or Kathleen to chime in on this one. I think it is tricky with these proposals to say anything firm about the budget, because there's really nothing firm in the DCL or solicitation about it. And we do have room to negotiate. You know, even if reviewers say it's too high, we could, if we want to pursue an award, we could ask you to lower it. I think it's really making it clear in your budget that the participants are being, as John said earlier, appropriately compensated for their time. You know, if they're missing out on summer work, they should be getting enough money to offset that. Or if they're taking on, you know, a lot of hours outside of their regular teaching duties, they should be compensated appropriately. And you want to make sure that there's a reasonable balance between the money that's going to participants versus everything else in the budget. And so sometimes it's tricky if you're, you know, say, including a lot of different disciplines and you've got a lot of personnel involved, that can make a budget big real fast. But the main thing for me is making sure the participants get what they need to be able to be participants. John, you want to add to that?
Well, just a question. Does that did that mean, I'm looking at Maltha's statement again about the 600K. that the reviewers felt that you were paying the participants too much, for example. But whether that's the case or not, I think the one thing you do when you put in the amount for the budget, make the case as to why you're using this budget.
Mhm.
But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't let you answer, Malcolm. Or Mel.
No, thank you so much for answering the question. I think overall the reviewers make a calculation how many, including personnel and how much we pay for the teachers. They make a calculation that it is too much overall the budget, no matter what, how much we're paying the teachers or the personnel. And I feel like the budget, because there's no specification, it's just so subjective for the reviewers. Especially we feel in Georgia that education is so underpaid, and we do not want to lower the budget. But when this kind of reviewers, we submit our grant twice, and when same comments come back about the budget, no matter how much we justify, it makes us question, like, even it is possible for us to doable this kind of grant, like, should we even apply for it? It's just something to think about, maybe during the review process, to communicate with the reviewers. We are really struggling with this. We took pretty much everything out from our first submission to second submission, and we still got the same feedback that for 30 teachers, 60K is too much. Without even the details, I mean, they don't talk about details. They're directly looking at the total budget versus number of teachers in it, basically.
Well, again, keep in mind, as Mindy mentioned, that budgets can be negotiated. Program officers often do that. In fact, sometimes they didn't negotiate it up. Most of the time, even or down though. But I would take a look at the other feedback on that, because in general, it's that if we want to fund a project and we feel the budget is not appropriate, we will work with you on that, and maybe even ask for a revised budget with some directions to that end. So again, I think you should stick with, look at what you need, what you think you need to have a successful project, and use that as your budget, and then go from there. Now, 30 students, another aspect of it could be, if you are going to fund several, so that's quite a few students. If you make the case that you can actually be able to recruit that many for your program. I know that's maybe a different topic on that, but
yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
well,
I think
hope that helps.
yeah, it really helps. Thank
And if you feel passionate about a project, we certainly would encourage you to continue to pursue it.
The next question is from Kelly about they had a Noyce track 1 that had a summer internship research component with research and teacher components that it sounds like was very successful, as she says. And could this program be a way to fund similar activities? And certainly the RESS projects, RESS, could augment a Noyce track 1. I mean, they're separate, but you could have both, and this would cover the summer research experiences. But I say that with the understanding that, if you get a track 1, you can't assume that you'll get an RESS. If you get an RESS, you can't assume that you'll get a track 1. And so, I mean, they can both occur, but you can't assume just because you have one that you'll get the other. And so it's kind of a chicken or egg situation, for how you want to approach that, which one's going to come first. But certainly this could cover summer research activities for participants, that some of which may come from a Noyce project.
The thing I wanted to add, Kelly, and I'm glad to see you're here and you're interested in still playing in this sandbox, is that in this program, if they are not already teachers, so therefore they are pre-service, you can't use this as a recruitment activity because they have to be STEM majors who have already are in the certification route. So unlike the way that you may have done stuff with your internships, in this program, if you're doing pre-service teachers, they are individuals who are going to get a STEM degree. And they, or perhaps they're in a post-bac that is in a STEM degree, but is going to get a pre-service, is in a certification track. And so it might be attractive to say to individuals, here's an opportunity, but this is for individuals at the pre-service level that are already committed to becoming teachers. And then of course, in-service teachers who are already teaching. And that brings me back to two things. One is elementary teachers could be part of this, and we know they're not typically certified to teach math or science or engineering or whatever. But if the elementary teachers teach science and math as part of their days, and they want to be a part of the research experience, then they certainly could be. Sometimes the challenge there, having done this kind of work previously when I was based at a university, is that the elementary teacher may not have a strong enough STEM background to be able to be useful and alongside a researcher in a research lab, but elementary teachers can certainly be involved. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we put out the DCL last year to call attention to this experience because it was the first time we were really offering it. In the new solicitation, as with the other one, we said pre-service and in-service, and we're not limiting it. We are not limiting it to pre-service, which we did with the DCL. If you look at the language in the solicitation, what it says is that we are going to prioritize funding of projects that focus solely on pre-service teachers or that focus on both pre-service and in-service. So if you're thinking of a solely in-service teacher, that's going to be a lower priority in our funding. Now, if we have enough money and it's a great proposal, then we'll be able to do it. But I just wanted to point that out. It's in the solicitation. You can do just what I do, is a word search for RESS and see what comes up. But so just know that when we look at funding and we have all the proposals that are really good, if we don't have enough money, we'll prioritize all pre-service first, and along with, I should say both first, two at first, pre-service and in-service. So those will get prioritized over the solely in-service. But if we have enough funds and it's a really strong proposal, well, let me say, when it's a really strong proposal, we try to find enough funds to do it. Thank you. And thank you, Kelly, for that question.
Yes, when we try to find the funds, we put a lot of pressure on our Noyce lead. Okay, to Heidi, as far as how specific on the projects, I think what you really want to do is to give reviewers a vision of what the students will be doing. You know, they will want to be able to picture the types of things they're working on, et cetera. Certainly it doesn't have to be page after page of a particular project, but get an idea of the type of projects, the level of projects. And a good way to do this would be to think of yourself as a reviewer. Once you write this, step back on it and say, what would I really like to see so that I can understand what this project is going to do on that.
I think with that,
I'm sorry. You know me, I can't hold myself back. John, you're right on target. I'm just going to say that stronger proposals are those that say something along the following lines. Mathematician John Haddock has agreed to mentor 3 in-service and 2 pre-service teachers in his math lab working on combinatorics. And this is the nature of the research. Or Kathleen Bergen has agreed to have 2 teachers, pre-service or in-service. Kathleen doesn't care, but her research is on freshwater algae in the limnology, and she's going to work. So when you give that little piece, oh, okay, so you know who the researchers are,
Yep.
and you know what the area of research is. That's stronger than saying we have 5 professors that have agreed to take 10 people in their labs.
Exactly.
And as a researcher, you can see the difference. I mean, as a reviewer, you can hear the difference in what I just shared. Thanks, John and Mindy.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And going down to Juan's question, can a researcher work with 2 or 3 teachers in the same topic but different objective? Actually, and I have colleagues who might correct me on this, they can be collaborative research. They could be working on the same objective. I mean, how many collaborative projects have you been involved in where there were joint authors on that? You just want to be sure that each, whether it's a pre-service or in-service teacher, is getting and is engaged in the authentic research experience. So you wouldn't want 2 people working on the same project, one of them doing all the work and the other, not being able to or not participating.
That reminds me of one thing that I see in reviews of these sorts of proposals, and it's reviewers sometimes get concerned that the pre-service or in-service teachers are just going to be mostly observing. You want to make it very clear that they're actually active in the research, that they are being STEM researchers. And so just clarify as much as you can what their particular activities and role will be as part of the research team or group.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go back to sharing screen. So we do have a few more slides. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about proposal preparation. John, you want to keep going?
I'll keep going. Okay. To submit to the RESS program, first you must talk to a program officer. It doesn't have to be one of the 3 who are really going to be more or less shepherding the program. I mean, for example, if you had a track 1 proposal, you really have a relationship already with your program officer, talk to that individual. But you need to talk to and to gain permission before submission, and we'll get to that in a minute too. But when you talk to them, send a 1 or 2 page summary in advance is always a good idea. Describe the participant pool, what you have in mind. Doesn't have to be just from your institution. Okay. The idea of the planned projects that you have in mind, the professional development, which is a very important part of it, that to integrate the research, to give these, whether it's pre-service or in-service teachers, ideas and let them develop ideas of how they would integrate what they're doing in terms of research back in the classroom. And again, it doesn't have to be the same type of research, but you want to generate that interest and that excitement about STEM and STEM education and STEM research. In dealing and talking to the program officer in your 1 or 2 page summary, make clear what your intellectual merit would be and then your potential for broader impacts, what type of impact that you would expect and the expected outcomes. You won't need a full budget when you're talking, but have a general idea and a general idea of the timeline. In general, they've been 3 to 5 years. It could be shorter, but you want to make sure if it were shorter, can you really get research done? That you would have to ask and answer that question. Is there going to be enough time where there can be meaningful, authentic research accomplished by the pre-service and or in-service teachers? And have a tentative timeline of what you have in mind, and that could change. It could change between the time you talk to the PO and the time you submit. And then we've already mentioned this, but we'll emphasize it. It can be any program officer that you talk to on this and that you gain permission from. excuse me, not any program, any Noyce program officer. And we'll have a list of those in a couple of slides from now. Although they may be, all these proposals may be submitted at any time. And you might not be ready by August on that. But if you submit by August, it gives us a better sense of how we can arrange or reviewing them. For example, they would be giving a little bit more priority. But as Kathleen mentioned a minute ago, if you have a good, strong proposal, we want to fund it. We're rooting for you. Okay. But the submitting in August does facilitate, certainly to some extent, the review process. When you submit, and we've not asked this before, but when you submit, include in the supplemental documents a copy of the email confirmation letter that you get from the program officer. Okay, so that will that certainly guarantees that you had permission, et cetera. We keep records of that too internally, but be sure you get that email and submit that as part of your proposal, again, in the supplemental documents as an appropriate place. Once you've submitted and have a proposal number, not the preliminary number, but the actual proposal number, send that to the program officer with whom you had talked and from whom you gained permission on that. So send that proposal number to them, and also feel free to copy any of us. But I would certainly start with that program officer. Okay, and here's some things that Cindy mentioned in a slide. These are also included in the solicitation. And regarding the solicitation, I should mention a couple of things. One is in the PDF version of it, the RESS program is discussed on pages 4 and 6. There's a paragraph on page 4 and a paragraph on page 6. You can take a look at that. But what we're talking about with respect to that, we're expanding on that. Certainly repeating what's there, but expanding on it. And the pre-service teachers that you have must be, and this has been mentioned, but I want to emphasize a couple of things, must be a STEM major. Now, they can be a STEM education or an education major too, but that would have to be a double major. They have to be an authentic STEM major. And what do we go by on that? The CIP codes, the Classification of Instructional Programs codes, and those are listed in the solicitation. So you might, if you're not sure if a major would be acceptable, take a look at the solicitation. But you will know for the most part. But it must be an authentic STEM major. Okay, so I think those are some of the things I wanted to mention before getting into this. Now, these are things, many of these would be expected, most of these would be expected for any Noyce proposal. You have to have a section on broader impacts in your 15-page project description. Of course, you know, in that 15 pages, we hope for 50 pages of information. But you have to have a section, a specific section on broader impacts. You don't have to have one on intellectual merit, but if you want the reviewers, for example, to realize certain components are really going to be the intellectual merit aspect of this, it's a good idea to let them know. To remind them, don't make them guess what the intellectual merit aspects would be, but you don't have to have a specific headlined topic of intellectual merit, but you do broader impacts. You want to give the rationale for any proposal that you write. In this particular case, what's your project plan? And in the plan would include the research experiences. What would be an idea of a plan? You would have summer research, but it could extend into the academic year. You know, include whatever information, whatever plan you have, make that very clear to all involved, to the reviewers and to the program officers, including descriptions. And we talked about that, and Kathleen expanded on that very well. Much better than I could have. The connections, we talked about this 3 times at least. The connections between research, the research the participants are going to be doing and how it's going to translate into the classroom. Okay, and so just figure out how you would make that connection. That is very important. In any Noyce proposal, you know, recruitment plan and the selection process, make sure those are clear. Okay, reviewers, if they're not clear to reviewers, they will let you know. Okay, assessment of project outcomes, again, that's really project evaluation, assessment, formative and summative feedback. Make sure you know you've indicated who's going to lead that. And it doesn't have to be one person, but often it's very useful that one person really has the lead responsibility on that, and work with that person or people early and often. Results from prior support. Any prior support, NSF support, you need to spend on that. That's in the PAPPG description of what to include there. You want to follow that. We have a reference to that, a link to that shortly. And in particular for any Noyce project that you might have had, but the RESS does not have to coincide or be involved with any other Noyce project. Okay, you do not have to have a Noyce project. Project management, make sure that it's clear how the project is going to unfold, what the implementation is going to look like, who's going to be responsible for what. That. And that's about all I have to say there. Here are some links. These are going to be available through AAAS site, through the Noyce. Actually, I'm not sure what all is going to be in the Noyce side, but certainly the solicitation, the reference to the DCL. You can look that up by just going to nsf.gov and put that DCL number in on that. But what we've talked about today is expanding what's in the Dear Colleague letter. So there are some links. I said PAPPG, you know, the Proposal and Award Policies Procedures Guide. Okay, you need, if you're going to be soliciting through research.gov, you certainly want to take a look at that. And I guess go on, here are the names of the program officers at this stage. You can talk to any of these as far as gaining permission and your ideas on your RESS proposal. Doesn't have to be the three of us that are ellipsoided there. It can be anybody, again, if there's someone with whom you're very comfortable in dealing with in Noyce, certainly talk to them. But any of us, and we'd be happy to email with you and then to have a Zoom conversation. Okay, some upcoming Noyce events. Well, except for the track 4, there's a track 4 webinar tomorrow. The tracks webinars for 1, 2, and 3 and capacity building have already been done, many this week, but those are recorded and are available on the nsfnoyce.org site. Take a look at, and there are the slashes. Take a look at those. This one will also be recorded. And the upcoming deadline is August 29th. And with that, I think we are ready for Q&A too. Even though we know we've probably answered every possible question you could have had.
Don, did you do your poll or are you waiting on that?
I think we're waiting for AAAS to do that, but we do have a poll. We're going to try to get some idea if you're planning on submitting or not. Of course, we're not going to hold you to it, but we'd like to just get some idea if you're going to submit, and if so, would it be by the August deadline, et cetera. So guess what? We're doing the poll. In other words, AAAS is on top of it. But anyway, well, let's go to the questions first then. We don't want you to leave before you do the poll. And we can wait you out. Okay, so let us know if you're planning on submitting. So give us an idea of when, and if you have a general idea of the date, that would be fine, and we know that you might not. And you could, an answer could be not really sure, but if, as close as we can get would be useful. But I ramble on.
I'll leave the poll open for another 20 seconds to give people some time to answer.
I don't know that I see any more specific questions in the chat, but Kelly did explain a little more about what she'd asked before. So Kathleen, I don't know if you want to, I don't know if there's a question there that we need to respond to, but I see that Nicole has a hand up. Nicole, you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Had a question, but I can wait.
Oh, well, we do have our poll results. Yes, we can. Okay.
Okay.
That's nice to see. Yeah, I think Nicole, you can go ahead.
Thank you. We're developing a set of cures based around astronomical research on solar system objects such as near-Earth asteroids. And we'd like to bring in-service teachers for virtual experiences that would combine both their research experience and then afterwards a collaborative process for them to become comfortable leading this same research experience with their own high school students back at their home institutions. So I guess I'd like feedback on a couple of aspects of this to see if we really overlap with what the area that you're looking for programs to be in. One is the fact that the instructor experience is designed to be virtual. And our primary motivation for that is that we want to have this be as accessible as possible and not pull people away from their home communities and all of the difficulties that travel entails these days. And then secondly, we're asking the teachers to both first engage in the research experience themselves, but then to turn around and to learn enough background so that they will be able to support research material experiences for their own students back at the home institutions, supported by the materials that we have created and are creating for this. And this is in the form of basically it's a web-based delivery program that enables them to conduct all of the analysis necessary for work on novae in the Andromeda Galaxy, and then for near-Earth asteroid orbital calculations and findings.
Okay, so was one of your questions whether that's an appropriate overall research topic? Didn't we just recently have NASA get very excited about some things they did with respect to an asteroid?
Oh, yes.
So that sounds to me fairly pertinent on that. And as far as taking back to their classrooms, for example, I mean, you certainly want to describe what that's going to look like, but we mentioned, of course, several times that you want to connect the research experiences with what they might take to the classrooms. That could be so they could give you immediate feedback. So to me, if I understood everything correctly, that would seem to be appropriate.
I think with the virtual setting, there's nothing that precludes virtual research experiences. And I think I haven't done one myself or been a part of one myself, but I think especially since the pandemic, people have figured out really good ways to have collaborative research in an online world. So I think if you can really paint the picture for reviewers and NSF staff for how in-service teachers would be able to, do research online, that there's no problem with that. I guess there's no issue there. And I guess one thing I'll add to what John said about the taking it back. Yeah, we definitely, it sounds like you're already going along the lines of what we wanted with translating back to the classroom. I would just say what I wouldn't be looking for there is doing the exact same thing. We don't want it to just be giving in-service teachers a classroom kind of module or something that then they're taking back and implementing that. But if it's a continuation of the research they're doing and they're just now involving their students, I think that would be okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And that's exactly the way it would work in conjunction with astronomers working on various projects of this type.
Yeah, just makes the case of why you want it to be virtual.
Thank you. Understood.
Elizabeth,
Hi, thank you so much for all the information. My main question is, our program for licensure is a master's program. So they get their undergraduate degree in STEM, and then they go into a master's program. So I don't really consider them pre-service till they're in our master's program. So if they were, say, in their senior year to apply and get into the master's program, would they could then be eligible as an in-service teacher, as a pre-service teacher. And I probably said that wrong a minute ago, as a pre-service teacher then that summer. Because I don't think our folks would be considered pre-service until they're in our program.
If they're at the undergraduate level and they're getting a STEM major with the intent to then get certified in a post-baccalaureate, master's degree, that would be considered pre-service for us by the Noyce. The usual Noyce scholarships are for juniors or seniors who are STEM majors, and they could be getting certified as an undergraduate, but not every institution, as you say, does it that way. And so they could still get those scholarships and be qualified or eligible, even if they aren't getting certified until the post-baccalaureate stage. And so I think it's they should be pursuing certification, but maybe not technically in that, master's. So yeah, as long as they're a STEM major that's pursuing certification, even a future master's.
Elizabeth, you indicated they would be accepted into the program. So they should be accepted into the teacher certification program to be eligible, but they don't have to have started their coursework.
Okay.
and that's what the master's program is about, certification?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's essentially a 5th-year program.
Good
Thank
question.
you.
Good question.
Kelly, I wanted to let you know that if you were putting in a track 1 proposal right now, you could have these internships in your track 1. You wouldn't have to get one of these RESS. But if you don't have a track 1 and you want to be able to place your pre-service teachers in research experiences, then you could put in for one of these. And there's nothing that precludes you to putting in for both, but I just want you all to know that in a track 1 proposal, you could incorporate research experiences into that. By the way, I started to say, and it's true, it would, if you're doing a track 1 and you had internships such as this, it would not count as part of the 60%. But in the, I call it RESS because I say research, so RESS comes out of my brain, but I understand there's nothing to make that a long E. But anyway, if in the RESS or RESS, there is no requirement for the 60% online F. That is just a requirement in the Noyce tracks 1, 2, 3, but not in the RESS program.
Yeah, it's not a scholarship program at all.
Right. Somebody else had their hand up, but maybe they left.
I think Elizabeth still had her hand up, but she took it down. And this has been an international webinar, by the way, because I know we had someone from Italy who was here. And I don't know why I mentioned that other than to fill space.
We did get another question in the chat from Bo about whether educational research on the outcomes of the RESS program could fit within the budget, or whether it'd be more appropriate for a separate track 4. And I think we had on a slide that it's not required, but I would also say it's not disallowed, that it could be appropriate. If there's someone on the project team, especially that has the relevant expertise and research background, that can take that on, that could certainly be welcome.
In fact, probably a lot could be learned from that. But again, it's not the same as the research, the STEM research that the participants would be doing.
Right. Definitely separate from that. Right, I think with that, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't see any hand raised. Anybody want to fit in a last question before we close this out? I'll turn it back over to our AAAS.
But thanks again for your interest. We look forward to your proposals. We really do.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And I'll just take a quick moment to say thank you all for joining us. This has really been a wonderful discussion. If you're interested, as mentioned, we have our final webinar for this prep series tomorrow, and that covers track 4, research and capacity building. And on our nsfnoyce.org website, we have recordings of all these proposal webinars, and all of the slides will be available, including this one and the one tomorrow, probably around midweek next week. And we'll also send this recording out to you all via email along with the slides. As you saw in the chat, there'll be a survey link. So if you have any feedback you'd like to share with us, we absolutely love any comments and suggestions. So please put them there. And with that, thank you all so much. And thank you, Dr. Haddock and Dr. Capaldi and Dr. Bergen, for your wonderful information today. Thanks so much, everyone.